for how long oil is going to remain the dominant energy source of the planet?
Well, that's a good question. And I've seen analysis by a lot of the major companies, and a lot of people point out to 40 to 50, 20,040, 2050, that we're going to see some of that where it's still going to be dominant, and then it will start tapering down. But if you look, you can go out to a lot of the major oil companies' websites, and under their sustainability tabs and some other places in there, they show projections of what they see as far as the oil and gas future and how it's going to play out.
So if we say around 15, 20 years, what are your thoughts on the future of the AAPG in this context of phasing out petroleum as the dominant energy source?
Well, I think that I'm more worried about just near-term things with AAPG than long-term things. You know, anytime you have less people getting in an industry, you're going to have less people that are going to join the professional side of it. Short-term, what I'm more concerned about in the next couple of years is we have a lot of things we do, like conventions and stuff like that. We're going to see, and we're seeing it right now, that a lot of the companies are pulling back support. Professional societies, whether it's SPE, AAPG, any of them, we're seeing less support from the companies because their stockholders really don't see that as a benefit. So those things worry me more, because if we lose the support of the companies within the industry, whether it be the engineering side or the geological side, it makes society life, something like AAPG and SPE, it makes it a lot harder. And when you have a big events like AAPG's ACE convention, SPE's OTC convention, if you don't have people willing to come to these conventions and they start being all virtual and stuff like that, it's going to impact the cash flow into those organizations, which is going to impact what they can do.
So, in other words, you see that the oil and gas industry is importantly decreasing in size and importance in the society, right?
Right, and we're doing things better. I mean, we're drilling wells better. We need less geologists to handle wells and stuff like that. So it's a typical deal. When I was in college, uranium was the big deal to go into prior to the 70s, and we went out and found more uranium than we ever needed. And if you're a uranium geologist, you got let go. And we've done the same thing in oil and gas. We go out and we find a tremendous amount of supply. And so companies don't need to hire as many people. And we've had a fundamental change in the oil industry back in the 80s that occurred. And one of the things that keeps getting forget about is when we went to the commodities market in the early 80s, like 82, before that, all the major companies had big exploration groups to go out and look all over the world to find oil and gas because they needed the feedstock for their refineries. There was no way to supply their refineries and their petrochemical industries without having their own feedstock. Well, in the early 80s, we bring along the commodities market. Well, now any company that wanted feedstock for their refinery could go to the commodities market and trade on the commodities market to get it. So we saw a big decrease in exploration groups within the 80s into all the major companies. A lot of them got out of exploration. They could buy reserves on Wall Street cheaper, and that's why we had all the mergers and stuff. So we had a fundamental change there, and we're probably looking at another fundamental change here. Technology has done wonders for everything, and even in our industry, we can make maps quicker. We can do a lot more analysis, machine learning and things like that, taking seismic and putting it in and playing out attributes out of that seismic that define everything from the Poisson ratios to the densities and everything like that is unbelievable. And all of that in itself takes less geologists to be able to do it, and takes more people that understand big data and things like that.
So yes, you see that in the future, the membership of the AAPG is gonna decrease, as well as all the other associations and societies related to geology.
Yes, and I think and you're gonna see it not only well, I don't know if I buy that completely, because some of the bigger societies that are not oil related may not fare as bad from that standpoint. But when you're talking about an industry where the geologists coming into the oil and gas industry, and AAPG and SPE and SEG are more about the oil industry, those are going to have some challenges ahead of them. But and the bottom line too is we're seeing surveys and stuff being done all the time. There are less and less geology students coming out of the universities. We're even seeing a case now where major universities used to offer geoscience degrees and stuff have dropped those programs. Tulsa, University of Tulsa, has dropped their geoscience program.
Why?
So because there's not enough demand out there for it. So when you go in and you don't have the demand and they look at dropping these programs and you have less geologists coming out of the universities, naturally, if your organization dependent on geologists, you're going to have less people, less members to go after.